Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
9/11, a day we'll never forget. A day that changed this country. We were attacked, but the very next day, we all came together and we were unified. Americans proudly waved their flags all over the country. Congress spontaneously sang "God Bless America" on the steps of the state capitol. And the country had the utmost respect for the first responders that risked everything to save strangers. Now, here we are 20 years later, with civil unrest, a divided country, and a war we're still fighting. It's time to heal. Many of the heroes who survived 9/11 have battled post-traumatic stress and other emotional scars for 20 years. Today, that ends.
"9/11 caused enormous human tragedy for the entire American population, but the first responders that had to respond to Ground Zero saw things that most people don't even see in combat. And many of them deal with that trauma still today. Police, fire, EMS, Port Authority, chaplains, a lot of those folks that responded are still struggling.
I'm reminded every day that it's the 20th anniversary. Dealing with the diseases and the ailments and the injuries that I've had due to responding to Ground Zero on 9/11, I'm reminded every day.
I was scheduled to work that morning. Our shifts are referred to as tours. So I was working the day tour. Beautiful blue sky, white puffy cloud day. Got into my firehouse. So I'm in the kitchen, and in the fire department, we have an audible voice alarm system that when there's fires, they'll make an announcement. And so the dispatcher came over and said, in the borough of Manhattan, there's a third alarm at One World Trade Center. So then we turned on the TV and we saw what was happening. We saw the tower burning.
The radio went crazy. You couldn't hear anything at that point because it was a dispatch to switch over to citywide when your unit got called for a mass casualty incident at the World Trade Center. As we came around the Horn, which is Battery Park, we started heading up West Side Highway, and the magnitude of what was going on really hit us in the face at that point. The debris must have been, a good foot deep. I turned to Jen at that point and said, I just ran over a body.
The city had done a total recall of the New York City Fire Department. It had only been done once before in the 60s when there was a citywide blackout. And I see the Pentagon had been struck. And I remember going over my handheld radio saying, they hit the Pentagon. And the chief at the fire is like, who said that? Who said that? And I identified myself, said, I'm watching it now, they hit the Pentagon.
A call goes over the radio, says, plane into the bridge. So we're heading down 395 towards the bridge that the plane was supposed to be crashed into. But as we head down, we see the Pentagon's all lit up, black smoke coming from it. Then multiple units start coming over on the air. It's not the bridge, it's the Pentagon. Plane is crashed into the Pentagon. Took the next exit, then pulled up onto the Pentagon, jumped the curb, went onto the grass. And there's just people running out. People running to the medic unit where I was. Just threw open the door, just started treating people. It seemed like everything happened so fast, like boom, helicopters are starting to land and starting to take people out. I don't even remember how many people I treated, but all I know is like eventually it stopped. Like people stopped coming. So I switched roles from being a medic. I had all my firefighting gear on there. So opened up the door, got dressed up, told my partner, I was like, hey man, I'm going in with these guys. You can keep doing the medic thing, but I want to do some rescue, see if anybody's in there that we can save.
As we were looking up The Marriott was on fire. There were people jumping. Cars were on fire. Debris was on fire. The streets were at least almost a foot thick of debris. And at one point, I remember looking up and seeing a woman fall down, get caught by the breeze, and to the right of me, she crashed through the windshield of a car. And I will never forget what that woman wore, because she had brown boots on, she had a skirt and a pink shirt on, and she had long brown hair. And I will never forget that picture of seeing her just fly across in front of us. As we were getting closer to the building, you were hearing bam, bam, bam. And that was people hitting the ground.
I didn't see any living people. As I was just kind of doing my search, it was just like just various forms of burned or death. I remember searching some areas where there were people piled up by the door and they were all clutching their key cards. I don't know if they were all piled up by the door and maybe the power had gone out and maybe they're, just frantically trying to make this door work. I have no idea, but like everyone had this death grip on their ID badges.
All of a sudden, you heard Captain DeShore say, "Back up." It was a good thing she did, because shortly after that, we heard pop, pop, pop. She says, "It's gonna blow." And we ran for our lives. We scattered. Our whole sector scattered. And at that point, we tried to get into Financial One, and we ended up in a void that we thought was the entrance into Financial One. Buried us 6 floors underneath this material. And we were entombed. And there was maybe 10 to 20 of us stuck in this void. And by the grace of God, with the air tanks and anything we had in our hands, the window broke to get into Financial One.
From 9 a.m. to probably like 1 in the morning, I just kept doing entries. I didn't take a break. I was running on pure adrenaline, I just felt invincible. I just wanted to get in there and just find someone, anyone. Because after all the people I'd gotten out, you didn't hear about any more victims, I was like, there's got to be somebody in there, man. There's got to be, and I just was hoping that, there'd be that hand sticking out or you could just hear someone. I found a private place in one of these ambulances that I went to the ambulance. I was like, I'm going to go inside this ambulance and just have some peace and quiet. And I'm sitting there in this ambulance, and there's a gurney in front of me. I'm sitting on the bench. I yank the sheet off the gurney, and I ball it up, and I just bury my face in it. And then I just yelled as loud as I could, because I was thinking to myself, this is gonna really mess me up. So I need to just get it out now, so I don't have to deal with it anymore. So, like I said, I buried my face in there, just yelled, and I was like, just forced myself to cry. I forced myself to cry.
We started heading towards the marina, and the ground shook again, and I'm like, holy shit, here we go again. So we ran into a parking garage, the Gateway parking garage, and we got buried again. We got buried alive again. So as this tornado, train noise, bomb, you name it, it was the loudest noise that we have ever heard, with the first tower going down, the second tower going down. After that loud noise, you couldn't hear a thing. It was so quiet.
My wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, was at Pace University, about 5 blocks away. I was on the cell phone with her, and as soon as the towers collapsed, all the cell service went out. I could only hear her and her roommate screaming, and I was trying to tell her to, get to the ground, get outside, and then all of the cell service cut off. So the last thing I heard was her and her roommate screaming. I thought for sure she was probably dead. The debris, and I knew what building she was in, and I could just see the debris just cover her building. I literally was ready to jump in the water and swim across the Verrazanos Bay to try to find her, if I could.
So I'd been a fireman now for 14 years. And again, yeah, I had already been active duty Navy. I'd been a police officer. So I've seen a lot of stuff. I remember trying to get myself mentally prepared for what I thought I was going to be seeing. In groups, we were going to whatever voids or openings we could see, hoping to find somebody in there. And we were searching, and you're basically searching by hand. And that was one of the things that always struck me too. There was nobody to treat. There were no bodies. No survivors. I was thinking that I was going to see, hundreds or thousands of people, with various injuries, and there weren't. So that was tough to try to comprehend. And I stayed there for it was almost like 2 full days. We didn't leave initially. You just got to the point of exhaustion. You just laid down in the street.
I was a minister. I was a minister of the Baptist faith. And when 9/11 took place, I just felt in my gut, I just felt the intensity of God wanting me to go down there. So I made my way down to Manhattan, and I ended up being picked up as a chaplain with the Red Cross. That's when my chaplain service began, on 9/11. Really, I really didn't know much about what a chaplain was at the time. And in all honesty, I was shaking in my boots because I had no idea what I was really there to do, except for, to the best of my ability, to care.
I was attached to 6th Communications Battalion. My unit went down to do a morgue at Staten Island Yankee Stadium. I had a friend who was in the National Guard, and he called me and he was like, "Johnny, I'm gonna go in." He's like, "Do you want to go in?" And I could see it burning from the Yankee Stadium. I didn't live far from the ferry, so I got civilian gear on. And as we waited to board the ferry, the firemen that were coming off of the ferry to be relieved by the firemen going on the ferry, there was a woman with a clipboard, and she was calling the names every so often, a lot of the names. It felt like every other, like 2 out of 3 almost. She'd call the name, and there would be no response, and then they'd call somebody else's name, and you would hear, and that's when we realized that, they didn't make it out, that they weren't coming back. And that's when it got really real for us, and it just got more real as the journey continued into the city.
And these guys are in the firehouse, and usually you take a shower, wash up before you go home. They jumped on the rig and went. They didn't have to go. They were off duty. They could have went home. And they died. Those are the things that stick in my mind. And then even now, like I said, one of my best friends is fighting leukemia. At least it feels like almost weekly I get a message, a text message from our union, a WTC-related death. And even at some firefighters, this was their first fire. They had only recently graduated an academy class.
As a matter of fact, walking down Ground Zero, I felt like I was in a war zone. It was like a ghost town. The pictures in the news, everything that you saw on TV, did nothing. It really couldn't show you what it was really like to be down there. There were times when I felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulder. One of those times in particular was when I actually had the honor of serving a family, a mother and father who had lost their son and the son's fiance. The mom shared her story with me, and she said that she received a call from her son. He said, "Mom, I don't know if you're watching the news, but if you are, you probably saw that a plane flew in to the towers. That's my building." And he said, as a matter of fact, where the plane flew in, it was lower than I am. Smoke is coming up through the floor. I'm not gonna make it out of here. So I just wanna thank you. I just wanna tell you I love you and I wanna thank you. Click. That was the last words that his mom heard from him. Being a chaplain is very rewarding, but it's very difficult. I can't do it in my strength, but I am honored. I consider it serving God by serving humanity.
Steel is still cherry hot. I remember feeling the bottom of my boots. I thought I was standing in like tar or something. Actually, the bottom of my boots they're like almost melting. The steel workers, those guys were amazing. They would come in and they were cutting steel to get it out of the way, and we were getting in there. And then that's when I remember when they first started finding bodies or more pieces. They would yell down the line, "We need a Stokes basket." And I remember I'm help carrying a Stokes basket with a body in it, and something fell out of it. I picked it up and just put it in my coat pocket. And I found out later on because it was Father Michael Gier was our chaplain. He was out in the street giving last rites, and he got hit by a jumper.
I looked to the left of me, and there was an army of ambulances, and their teams were all just sitting on the edge of the ambulance with their heads in their hands. And you know, at first, my first thought was like, "Get in your ambulance, let's go, follow me." You know, like an idiot, I guess. I soon found out why they were doing what they were doing. I remember the glow of the steel. It was like a filament in a light bulb, but these are giant iron rods, and the smell, and that's when I realized that that's why the EMS weren't doing anything. Like, we were too late. There was just too much debris. Like, if there's a hell, I looked into it. There's just you could smell the jet fuel, you could smell the metal, and you could smell the people burning. And I found they made a makeshift command center over at the Burger King that I used to go for lunch. The windows were all blown out, and I asked what I could do, and they said body recovery is all we got right now. And so I tried to help with body part recovery. It wasn't even bodies, it's just pieces. That's what really got me. These weren't Marines, they weren't soldiers, they weren't sailors. These were the people that I would sit next to, you know, on the terrace and eat lunch on lunch break. These were the people on the subway with me. They were the people that, you know, were in line at that Burger King, you know, like knowing that that's who was the smell that I was smelling. Those were the people that were burning. Those were the people that were trapped under there.
That's when I also suffered from something that later on I come to know is known as compassion fatigue. And that's a total exhaustion, right, in all those areas.
Like the drop ceilings in some of these rooms, I guess they just got so gooey and wet, they just collapsed. So it covered the ground like kind of snow, like a blanket. And I remember going through that at night, like when it's pitch black. But then the second time I went through, then I could see, I looked down at my footprints and like there were people under there. Like not living people, but, you know, dead people. But, you know, I thought to myself, how many times did I go through this room and walk on these people, you know? And I was really pissed off at myself that I didn't notice that.
My first realization with how the trauma was going to affect me is I was seeing individuals with guns and all white clothes running through my backyard. I was hearing planes on top of my house. Helicopter noises would drive me absolutely batty because that was one of the last things that I saw before the first tower had fallen.
To be honest, a lot of us are struggling and don't know we're struggling. I was never even aware of the fact that I was having symptoms of PTSD or PTS. We lived for so long that we didn't, it was just part of our life. We didn't think of it as struggling, We didn't realize that there was another way to live because it literally changes you from like the DNA out.
So many people drank and drugged themselves to death. That's a reality. I've had many of my coworkers commit suicide.
I realized something was off because of my sleep patterns. I would toss and turn. I would wake up many times. I would have dreams.
A bad thing about 9/11, it made me, like, it kind of pointed me into more risky behaviors. Like, I put myself in situations I shouldn't have been in, more dangerous situations.
A lot of anger, just angry. Thankfully I never struck anybody but I would get angry, punch a wall, arguments at home, it kind of was a tipping point. And then I would isolate. I would just shut out the world.
My wife and I, we never, if it came on the news, we turned it off. To this day, we don't. To this day, we haven't been back to ground zero. We spent almost 20 years with this and just learning how to deal with it on our own, just ignoring it, trying not to watch it. I don't think we understood how much it affected us.
I remember the fire department after 9/11, they were trying to force us into these groups where we would talk about how stressful it was, how are you going to deal with this stress? And, I just kept, during these groups, I sit in the back and just kind of roll my eyes and I'm like, nah, this is BS. This is just some woke stuff that I don't need. This stuff is just for bitches. It's for weak people, When that first 1 year anniversary came up, I thought I was good. TV popped on and they're talking about 9/11 and boom. Man, I got really emotional. I started crying. I was dating a lawyer at the time in DC and she's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Fuck, I can't believe I'm crying, man." I had to walk out. I didn't want her to see me cry. I was like, "I can't believe this has happened to me. Why the hell am I crying? Why am I feeling like this? This is ridiculous. I'm not one of those people." I just it was really hard for me.
My sleeping patterns, forget that. I don't sleep. There's really no sleeping. One of the effects after 9/11 is I did not like to be in the dark. I slept with the lights on for close to a year.
9/11, watching the towers fall and then being there. I'll never it's seared. Seared to the point where if I drive down the street during the summertime and somebody's cooking pork, ironically enough, hot dogs no problem, burgers no problem, corn no problem, but I can distinctly tell if it's pork because it smells so much like the smell that was down there. And to this day, it affects me just smelling. And I never thought the smell would be what would make me think and reflect back onto it. But ironically enough, smell is probably the worst. But you just learn to disconnect from, like when you drive by that barbecue and you smell that smell. You just learn to pretty much turn off any emotion, either happiness or sad. You just numb.
And then the next anniversary would come, and and it just kept getting worse to the point where I really have to hide from that stuff, like with social media, or if you see it on the news, it pops up. I really have to avoid it. I have to because I just don't want to. I don't want to get emotional about it. It's such a weird feeling, I never like it's like I can't control it almost, it's like I can't control it unless I'm away from it. Like a lot of my friends have gone to the Pentagon because they've made a little park. Been back to DC either by myself or I brought one of my kids, and I've always meant to go there, like just to walk that area again, but I just always find an excuse not to do it. I don't know.
Claustrophobia is another thing. I would not get on elevators. I would not come into the city. And if I came into the city, I was not going underground because I was buried alive. Today was the first day that I came in by myself, didn't get in a taxi, and walked here, which is a big thing for me. And that's 20 years later.
I don't sleep much. No. You can ask any of my friends. You can call me pretty much any time of day or night, and chances are I'm awake.
I shut off all my friends, all my family. I didn't want to be around associates. I didn't want to hear useless conversations. I didn't want to be around people talking about really trivial things, So my circle got tighter. I'm going to go to Japan. Get off the plane, squiggly lines here, all this gibberish being spoken. I was like, man, this is perfect. I felt so calm and relaxed. It was like walking around. It was just white noise, very relaxing, very calming for me. I didn't have to deal with anyone. If I bumped into someone, they're saying sorry. I get my tattoos, just walk around, enjoy the sights and the culture. People walk by me. It's just like being in like a video game or something that no one interacts. It's like they're just walking by, and I don't have to acknowledge them. I don't have to look at them. I don't have to talk to these people. It's so peaceful.
Just recently, myself and a few members of my team from New York State Chaplain Task Force, we went down to Surfside, Florida, where the condominium collapsed. It immediately just reminded me of 9/11. Then seeing the rubble, the smell, the clouds of dust, and it took me right back there all over again. The looks on the faces of the people, feeling helpless, feeling hopeless. When I got back to my room with my team member who I was staying with, I cried. I just wept.
My hope, if I can not want to feel like my whole body wants to throw up every time I see the Twin Towers, a picture, or hear about it. So I know we're gonna try to go to Ground Zero in a couple of days and film me, and I don't know if I can do it. I haven't been back there since that night. So, like, how many people want to stand back in hell?
Trauma can change your life, and it can impact you in profound ways, and mostly very, very negative. We use a process called the Trauma Resiliency Protocol that's changing that. And we've successfully worked with thousands of people across the United States and even around the world. And it's impacting their lives, changing their lives for the better, getting them back to the people that they're actually meant to be. Carlo was in Japan, but the other first responders we actually met in New York City at the Westgate Hotel, and we asked them to share their 9/11 experiences. So after they conducted their interviews, we put them through the Trauma Resiliency Protocol, and the results were amazing. I felt the same shift back in September of 2018 when I went through an alternative treatment that changed my life. I've worked law enforcement and I've done combat. So when I was in Afghanistan, I was an infantry squad leader, so I led soldiers in combat. During that deployment, half of my men were medevaced out of country, and one of my soldiers, Doug, was killed by a roadside bomb August 19th of 2011. And the weight of that responsibility and that guilt was huge. I mean, it impacted me to a point where after returning from Afghanistan, I self-medicated with alcohol, and I got to a point where I was actively suicidal. I didn't want to die. I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was invited to attend a men's leadership retreat, a retired Army colonel had put on. So I met he's my best friend right now, Nick Davis, awesome dude. He was kind of the group leader for the group that I was in.
And I'm going around the room introducing everybody. And I can see this one guy over in the corner, and he's with, there's two of them that are kind of newer to the group, but Dan is sitting there in the corner, and he's sitting in a chair, his head's down, he's withdrawn, he's not talking to anybody, and I could feel it. I could feel it and see it, that he was jammed up. Now, this guy's hurting, I don't know what it is.
I had so many emotions going through my mind. I'm like, I don't want to be here. I don't know these people. I don't trust these people. I was sleep deprived. I didn't sleep very comfortably because you're always on edge, you're always on alert. A lot of that negative self-talk, do I deserve to even be here?
So we leave that weekend, and Dan goes on his way, I go on mine. We come back together 6 months later, and here's this guy smiling. He's like, hey, Nick, how's it going? How you doing? And I'm like, what in the heck happened to you? Where's that guy that was stuck in the corner and, looked like he's ready to jump off a bridge? And he's like, dude, I'm good. I'm like, what do you mean you're good? And he's like, I'm good. The PTS gone.
I uttered the words 22-0, and everybody was like, well, what's 22-0? I said, we're losing 22 veterans every day to suicide. We're going to take it to 0. Of course, they're all looking at me like, dude is crazy.
And we're all kind of chuckled a little bit. We're like, okay, where are you gonna? This is impossible, right? An impossible task. And where is this coming from?
For me, I'm a ready, fire, aim kind of guy. This is what we're gonna do. How are you gonna do it? I have no idea.
Right after that, the wheels started turning. We got the nonprofit started, and that's when Dan asked me to serve on the board.
We have two distinct processes that we use. We use the Trauma Resiliency Protocol. That's for PTS, post-traumatic stress, and acute stress. And then we have another process that is called Emotions Management Process, or we call EMP. We went back to the roots of these types of these alternative treatments, and it comes out of the world of neuro-linguistic programming. And remarkably, these processes were literally developed back in the early 1980s. When you're exposed to a traumatic event, it's not the visual that becomes the problem, it's the emotional attachment. So you witness this IED blast, you lose a buddy in combat, and then an emotion attaches to it. Okay, that is amygdala, that's fight or flight.
TRP is where we work on a traumatic event. I call it the mental margarita. It fits for me, and it really is. You can walk out feeling amazing.
And all of a sudden, those emotions go from the amygdala, they split, and then the memory goes to the cerebellum, the emotion goes to the hippocampal region of the brain, and then the brain starts to heal itself. And all we're doing is guiding the process. We're not doing anything magical with anybody. We're just teaching their brain to do something that it can do. It just doesn't know how yet. And then all of a sudden, brain's got a new skill, and then it starts processing out. They'll hit REM sleep, and then all of a sudden, you get a really big traumatic event neutralized. No more fear, terror, helplessness associated with it. So when we do the Trauma Resiliency Protocol, what we're doing is we're disconnecting the emotion neurologically, so that emotion is no longer connected to the visual. We say that the brain is made up of two components. The conscious brain, that's like you and I having this conversation, that's like 10% of the brain power. 90% is subconscious, it's below our conscious awareness. So that's our heartbeat, our breathing, when we know we have to take a breath when we're sleeping because your brain is subconsciously telling it, that's the 90% that controls most of what we do. That's where the trauma is stored. That's where the anger is stored. It's all subconscious, which is why you trigger and you don't know why you trigger. That's what we call, the conscious is what we call the weak brain. The subconscious is what we call the strong brain. And that's why traditional therapy doesn't work, because you're trying to talk your way through the issue. The problem is below the conscious level. So when you go to the root, you're able to actually get to the actual trauma and neutralize the emotions and let the brain do what the brain does. And it's remarkable when you actually see what it does and how people get back to normal baseline emotions.
Dan will often say no content. No content means you don't have to discuss your trauma. We've worked with so many people that had sexual abuse as a child, have been raped, you name it. You don't want to talk about those things. And if you've already talked about them with a therapist, a number of times, you're kind of sick of talking about it. So you don't have to talk about any of it. We don't want you to. It keeps us safe, keeps you safe.
And what EMP does is it's equally profound as the TRP, but it's dealing with underlying negative emotions, like people who have anger problems or rage problems or sadness or survivor guilt or grief, or abandonment issues. Or maybe it's a self-limiting belief, like they believe they're not worth it.
Or, my first marriage fell apart. Guilt, just racked with guilt. It just wouldn't go away. And so every morning, I didn't think those thoughts consciously. I wasn't like, I hate myself, I suck. It just was there. And then Dan ran me through that process, the EMP process, and it was all of a sudden I wake up the next morning and I literally went, wait, you suck. No, that doesn't work anymore. Like, I'm consciously trying to tell myself, I suck. I hate myself. I don't. Like, it was just gone. I can't explain it other than it just seems too crazy to be believable. But when you feel it, you can't deny it. That's why I tell people, you have to see it. You can't unsee it. When you see the processes work, you cannot unsee it. And I don't blame people for being distrusting and very skeptical, because it does sound too good to be true. And a lot of people have been through a lot of pain and suffering in therapy or different modalities where it's talk about it, relive it, or they just live with it for so long, it seems there's no way this could ever change for me. But it can. It can and it will. And it doesn't require your belief.
I'm excited because I know how the alternative treatments helped me in my life and our mission as a nonprofit. But I'm really excited to see how the 9/11 first responders that we interviewed, how it's going to impact and affect their lives.
First of all, I was uncertain on what it was going to be like, how much of an impact it can be. Well, to my surprise, it was a great impact. So not only was I surprised, but in addition to being surprised, I'm very grateful.
After TRP, I slept like a baby. It's like the best sleep I've had in a long time, hands down. Sometimes I'll just drink a lot so I could just pass out and not think, but I didn't need anything.
With the TRP, there is a marked difference with me. One of the things I can give you an example of is when I come into the city through the Long Island Railroad, I don't like being on the railroad because that means I have to go through the tunnel to come into the city. And with being buried alive twice down at Ground Zero, I clinch myself, I tighten up, I hold my breath until we get through the tunnel and pray to God that they don't stop in the tunnel. Tuesday evening when I was going home, when I got home, I realized I didn't even think about the tunnel. And today coming back, when I went through the tunnel, I didn't even pay attention to the tunnel. They stopped in the tunnel. I didn't freak out because usually I would get up and pace back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, sweat, breathing, let me out, let me out, let me out. And no issue.
And the changes that I've seen so far was definitely sleep. I slept, I had good dreams, I didn't wake up like I felt refreshed when I woke up. And the second thing that is the most noticeable is the ache when thinking about it. Instead of it being from head to toe, it's just like a little bean, and like a little peanut, I guess.
Every year 9/11 comes around, I told you, I get emotional, I get upset, and I could carry that boulder up the hill like Sisyphus every 9/11 anniversary, hoping that this will be the time. It doesn't bother me. But after going through this, I'm going to be all right.
The fear, the being afraid, thinking that it's going to do harm to myself, that's not there anymore. It's not. It's an event that happened in my life. I identify it. I know it happened. I'm not happy it happened. But, I have to be able to move on with my life.
After the fact, when I left, when I was going back to my car and I passed a corner, and after I passed the corner, I got to my car and I was like, holy cow, I didn't just check the corner before I passed it. And I always check every corner I ever walk past. I'm normally always on guard, always like this door behind me. I would never be able to sit with a door behind me without totally twitching and always constantly looking behind me. But I didn't even feel like I needed to be on guard. I just went to my car, like I was going to my car.
What was interesting is that when I got home, I usually have difficulty falling asleep. I don't fall asleep very easily at all. It takes me some time. However, what I did was I utilized the process, and I was definitely able to fall asleep quicker, and not only fall asleep quicker, but I slept through the night, which is very unusual.
Well, when I think about 9/11, I don't have any regrets anymore.
Today, I kind of felt like a tourist, because when I come into the city, I come in specifically for a reason. In, out, done. Usually, I run through Penn Station to get up onto the concourse. Took my time, looked up, and it was like, wow, I really haven't looked at the skyline in years. I definitely want to come back in, where before I had no desire to come in.
But we're coming up on the 20th year, and from what I thought of then to now is more, there'll always be a degree of sadness. It'll never, because of the loss. One of the tools we used yesterday, I remember the questions were like, what would they want me to do? Would they want me to quit? Would they want me to be upset? No, I think, the brother firefighters to any other firefighter, they would want us to move on with our lives and continue what we do and to honor them.
I feel much more hopeful that I can actually enjoy the moments with my wife and family, but more fully. For a very long time, no matter what situation I was in, part of me wasn't there. And just yesterday alone, I was able to be much more fully in the moment with my children. And I've always been a very active father and involved father, but emotionally, there's always been a big part of me that's been detached. So I'm very hopeful, because it seems like my emotional ability to give is a lot larger. It's been unlocked, I guess.
I'm always going to have the memory. I'm always going to have the feeling, but not allow it to control me.
It really distances you from the event so far that you realize that like you can't bother you anymore because it's so far away.
This morning, I was actually laughing, belly laughing, which I probably haven't done in quite some time. And it sounds so minute, but when you're living in the constant shadow of a trauma, you're always looking over your shoulder. You're hypervigilant. You're waiting for that shoe to drop. I want to live life. I want to enjoy life.
20-year anniversary, 9/11's coming up. I had mentioned during the TRP that, I'd never gone back to the site, even after they had made the memorial park. I've wanted to go, but I just thought that I couldn't go because it would just be too emotional for me. I just didn't want to be some guy walking around in the park crying like a crazy person, That's my new bucket list. I have to go. I'm really stoked about that, being committed to going now, because I was absolutely refused. I was like, there'd be no way in hell I was going back there.
After 20 years and because of TRP, Carla was able to go back to the Pentagon on the 20th anniversary, saying, "I thought it would be tough because every year I was kind of conditioned to be emotional, but I didn't feel it at all. It was great sharing it with my sons."
If I'm not myself because I'm feeling overwhelmed, then I don't feel like I'm giving my best. Just being able to utilize this skill, it will help me come to and to enlighten my spirit. It'll help to enlighten my spirit. And if my spirit is enlightened, then I can better serve others and help prevent compassion fatigue.
I definitely don't put my stamp of approval on anything unless I've actually tested it or gotten my hands dirty with it. And everyone knows me, you know, I shoot from the hip. I tell it like it is. So if I say it works, it works. I have to put it through the ringer, beat it up, and go through it first. So it worked for me. That's all I have to say.
I haven't been back since that night. The closest I've gone is 2 blocks. When I first agreed to do this, I didn't think I was going to be able to go back. Even, especially after we filmed, I was thinking to myself, well, this isn't going to happen. It's a big shift. I never would have even thought that I would go to Ground Zero again, ever. I'd never intended to the rest of my life. I think it's important that I do go, because I think it will actually give me some closure. Long overdue.
Although Carlo was in Japan and Bonnie had a wedding to attend, the 3 other first responders joined us at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, including John, something he thought he would never be able to do. It was an emotional time for him, and at one point, he turned to Chaplain Kim and asked her to pray with him. That visit, his first time back to Ground Zero in 20 years, allowed him to finally get closure and begin to heal.
The average person, when you talk about PTSD, the disorder, they don't believe that you can heal, all right? And even the clinical world struggles with that.
This is the real problem, is that you get people who have initials after their name, and we've experienced it with the VA. Oh, you can never get rid of it. It's a life sentence. It's not. And when you've worked with hundreds and as collectively as a group, thousands of people where they can walk through your door and they have severe PTS and they walk out with a smile on their face and they're sleeping good, you can't tell me that you can't get rid of PTS. And that was, been the whole mission, is to find a better way to do this and start healing our own, because the system has not been working. And I don't want to lay that blame at anybody's feet, but I know that it works, and I know that PTS can absolutely be healed.
This soldier was on the phone with me, and I was talking to him, and he's like, I'm sitting here with a bottle of Tito's and a 45, and I don't know which one to go to. And I'm like, brother, just give me some time. I need you sober to do the process. And he's like, I haven't been sober in like 10 years. And then 2 days later, we connected. He said, all right, I'm ready to go. And then I run him through, we did 2 hours worth of work. And then a few days later, he sends me a message, and I'll read it. And we get these things regularly. And his name is Chris. I'm going to get emotional because these things are powerful. I love you, man. Truly love you. You have done for me more than anyone that I can think of. I have peace. I have never had that in my life. Thank you. Anything you need, I will be there. You, sir, are the answer to anything anyone has going on. Just thanks, brother. I don't know how else to say it. It brings me to tears every night, knowing I'm going to wake up looking forward to the day. Chills. It's just remarkable.
It's important to get help because it's something that's going to keep following you until you do.
When you're supposed to be the hero, right? When you're the one that's supposed to, be taking care of everybody else, you're usually the last person that wants to ask for help.
I met Jesse, he's a Marine combat vet, and he was also a firefighter. And in 2017, state of Arizona awarded him Firefighter of the Year for the entire state.
And I spoke in front of hundreds of firefighters at the state fire school. I was at the pinnacle of the profession in front of hundreds of firefighters at the State Fire School, but I was slowly being chipped away inside. And I was pushing all the people in my life away. I had this anger and anxiety fueling me. No one understood. I felt so resentful towards the people that were around me, and the people that I loved, I was pushing them away. It destroyed me inside. It, like everything that I had lived up to that point, was a lie. Like, why am I doing this? And I just broke down. And I'll just cry. And the only way I could sleep is to smoke weed. And then it became so bad that the only way that I could sleep anywhere, including the fire station, was to smoke weed. And so then there I was, the firefighter of the year, smoking weed at work. And then I started to have suicidal thoughts. After going through this experience, it's like I've removed this backpack of weight that I didn't know I was carrying. And now I feel free. I feel free to live my life, to do what I want to do, to create, to serve my community, my country, to be there fully present for my family, instead of being burdened by my past mistakes and these things that happened years ago. I feel free.
If you're a police chief, a fire chief, a sheriff, if you're a general officer or even a sergeant in a platoon, all right, do not ever discourage your men or women from seeking help, because that is the condition that's causing our active service members and our active first responders to take their own lives. We have to remove the stigma, because if trauma is neurological and not psychological, what's the issue, right? We're not dealing with a psychological weakness. You're dealing with the brain hijacking the neurological process, where all these emotions are being expressed in ways that they don't understand. And then they make poor decisions when those emotions are flooding their mind. We gotta stop. We gotta let people know that it's okay to ask for help.
You're not 100%, right? So why would I want to go into work as an active duty person, law enforcement, firefighter, if I'm 50%? Think about it that way. If you think about your brothers and sisters that you work with, and you're like, I'm going to show up to work even though I drank myself to sleep last night, and I'm doing other drugs just so that it keeps the demons down and the pain down, and I don't have to feel it. And now something happens. There's a massive fire, or there's an active shooter situation, or there's something going on, whatever it may be, and you're not there mentally, right? Who are you putting at risk? You're putting the people that you serve and love most at risk. So it's actually your duty and mission to make sure that you're 100% mentally and physically, right? People's lives are at stake. Your family's lives are at stake. Your life is at stake, because you can only live with it for so long before, unfortunately, too many people decide, I can't live with it anymore. You know, that you're serving your family and the people around you by getting the help or getting the solution that we have that will heal the problem quickly and effectively.
We were at a negotiations conference, and one of my teammates was actually in trauma, and this might be the first time he hears this, but he was so bad at that conference that I almost removed him from the team.
Dan was speaking at the conference. After he spoke, my friend had told me, hey, you need to go speak with them. And I was like, no, I'm good. I saw the therapist, and the therapist said I was fine. I don't need any help. And they're like, no, you need to. And literally took me by the hand out into the hallway where I met with Dr. Royster. She met with me right there in the hallway. We sat down, and she ran me through TRP right there, and immediately I was changed. That was the last day of the conference. After meeting with Dr. Royster, I went home. I cried. I was extremely upset that I had let myself carry on for so long, carrying so much and never really getting any resolution or treatment or really any comfort in the situations I was dealing with. And after that, it was life-changing. It saved my life. I was in a very bad place at that time, and it definitely changed my life.
When I saw what it did for him, his facial expressions had changed within an hour. It was like he was a different person. So I said, wow, this is something real. So I brought it back to the sheriff's office and I said, hey, this is something that I just saw work. What do you think? And then we immediately set up a meeting with Dan and Dr. Royster. And then while we were in the meeting, I got emotional because I was thinking about what it did for Brandon. And I started thinking about, well, not can this just work for him? This could work for an entire agency. I met with her also after our meeting there. I went through TRP and realized how special it really was and how much it really worked. I'm a completely different person today than I was a month and a half ago. And even though what I do is stressful, I mean, we're dealing with, the worst of the worst crimes. Even though I'm dealing with those things on a daily basis, I come home a lot happier. I'm not as fatigued. I'm sleeping like unbelievably. I actually know what an alarm clock is for now. I get it. I didn't need one for years. What do you need an alarm clock for if you're awake at 3 a.m.? You don't need one for 6 a.m. to get up because you're already awake.
It is okay to ask for help because if we can't help ourselves, we can't help other people. Since going through the process, my mental state has improved tenfold. I can recognize dangers better. I can recognize issues in others better. I can address those issues and help them. It's definitely changed my life. Before I went through this process, I was very clouded. I wasn't able to make those decisions as quickly as I should have been able to, which in law enforcement can be life or death. Not only life or death for me, but for other people that are involved.
Police departments, fire departments, emergency services, corrections staff, we can train your service members to do these protocols and a peer support, because that's the best way to move forward. It's all in the peer support, because we've all walked in each other's shoes.
You just got a call, there was a mass shooting. You have a large group of your folks, your department, are there on scene, seeing things that most of us would pray to God we'd never see. And you come back from that moment, that day, the next day, and you have a peer support team that is trained in these processes. One cop with another cop, one firefighter with another firefighter, veteran with a veteran, active duty. You can implement it and be proactive after a bad event.
When you start reframing these negative emotions, like anger or fear, when that citizen pulls a dark object out of their pocket, that officer is going to have another probably half second to make a decision. Is that a cell phone or is that a gun? So we call that subconscious de-escalation. So they're able to de-escalate situations because they're not triggering. You've already neutralized their triggers. And if they don't trigger, when a citizen comes at them, that's just a win-win for everybody.
I think the importance of the peer-to-peer thing is the brotherhood. You're not going to speak to the person in the suit over in HR that's going to refer you to the employee program, and you're always concerned about your job. You're concerned about if any of that's going to get back to your employer. If it's a peer-to-peer thing, you already know that the person helping you has been there. They've seen that. They can relate to you. They can relate to how you're feeling in the situation there, and you feel more comfortable to be open to that treatment at that time.
And we're fortunate that we're putting 12 people through the training next week. So there will be 13 of us total here at the sheriff's office that will be peer coaches. I get emotional now, but it's because I see what kind of help we're going to be able to give our agency. The relief that this can bring to everybody here is overwhelming.
We can use it with law enforcement officers, with dispatchers who hear the call before we're ever even dispatched. People underestimate how much trauma they go through by listening to it and not being able to do anything and saying help is on the way over and over again. Firefighters and paramedics. There's also prison guards and doctors, military veterans, active duty military. All these people can benefit from TRP and EMP.
I think if every agency could have at least one or two peer coaches, it would be a huge benefit.
The World Trade Center was destroyed at Ground Zero, and much tragedy came from that. But out of the tragedy has come hope. No matter how difficult the trauma, there is healing, there is hope, there is a future. And your life can be restored.
Karen Day. When I was 18 years old, I was beaten, raped, tortured, and held for over 8 hours. I had horrendous PTSD. I couldn't sleep, night terrors 5-6 nights a week, self-destructive behavior, lashing out at my loved ones, anger, shame, embarrassment, resentment. It dictated who I was. But in 2019, I met the awesome people at 22Zero and went through TRP and EMP and got my life back. Immediately, a load was taken off of my chest. I could breathe, I could sleep. I didn't feel the need to self-destruct. It was amazing. It saved my life, and it could save yours too.
My name is Daniel Starr. In 2005, I was a missionary for my church in the Philippines. During that time, while we were walking down the road, we had bags thrown over our head and we were captured and put into a hole in the ground. They took us out every day and beat us. At one point, I even heard someone get decapitated. It was terrible, it was horrific. The screams continued to haunt me from when I came home for years and years. I got to the point where I became a danger to myself and to my family. At that point, a friend of mine introduced me to Dan Jarvis. And through him, I was able to get the TRP process taken care of, and my trauma completely disappeared. I was able to just go through, go back to my life, went back to school, got my bachelor's degree. I'm currently in a master's program, getting a master's of chaplaincy, so that I can come back and help soldiers and their families have the peace and love that I have in my life now.
I'm Larry Clayton, a 14-year Navy veteran. 35 years, 8 months, and 14 days is how long I suffered with my own traumatic events. August 21st, 2021 was the last day in the culmination of my attempt at suicide. My wife ended up stopping me from grabbing my gun, and my best friend ended up talking me down. Within 5 days, I met Nick Davis with 22Zero. He ran me through EMP and TRP, and in 2 hours, I felt the best I ever have in my whole life. No more rage, no more nightmares, no more aggression, and the best thing about it is my wife gets to see me smile more than I ever have in my whole life.